So I came across this article the other day called "Feds Insist Second Amendment Doesn't Protect Machine Guns." And the more I read, the more surreal it got. Not because I was shocked, but because of how casually the government is willing to reshape the Second Amendment into whatever suits them. So let's break it down. I'm gonna quote what they actually said word for word, and then I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with it. First things first, they said the quiet part out loud. Machine guns are atypical weapons not protected by the Second Amendment because a reasonable person would not expect them to be used in militia service. The federal government argued. Stop right there. The Second Amendment was literally written with militias in mind. You don't even need to interpret that. It says it right in the amendment, a well-regulated militia. So let me get this straight. We're supposed to trust the government's definition of what a militia should look like while they militarize every federal agency down to the IRS. Nah, that logic doesn't track. You can't argue that the Second Amendment is for militias and then say machine guns are too militia-like to be protected. That's called eating your own argument. And then now they come into this whole common use and the dangerous loophole rhetoric. Quoting Judge Folks Jr., the article says, Heller explained that the type of weapons protected by the Second Amendment were those in common use at the time, and we think that limitation is fairly supported by the historical tradition of prohibiting carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons. Here's the game that they're playing. If they can regulate something hard enough that nobody owns it anymore, they can then turn around and say, see, it's not in common use. That's not public policy, that's entrapment by legislation. They priced machine guns out of existence with the 1986 ban, and now they're saying nobody uses them, so they're no longer protected. It's like tying someone's hands behind their back and then mocking them for not clapping. But the court actually pushes back slightly. Here's where things get interesting. Judge Now Bandanian, I'm pretty sure I butchered the hell out of that, asked this one question. Isn't the 1986 machine gun ban the first? That's fairly powerful evidence of no historical evidence of the federal government banning any category of weapons. Finally, someone said it. If we're using history as the measuring stick for what's constitutional, then the fact that it took until 1986 for the federal government to ban a category of guns should matter. That's 200 years of not banning entire categories of weapons. But apparently, the government's idea of a historical analog is the regulation on gunpowder in the 1800s, to which Now Bandian replied, damn, I'm butchering the hell out of this man's name. So he responded with, that was a fire code issue so they wouldn't blow up the town. Exactly. That wasn't about disarmament. That was about preventing a literal explosion hazard in wooden cities. So now we're using fire codes to justify federal weapons bans. Now, later in the article, Assistant U.S. Attorney Eileen Kuo argues the Second Amendment does not include the right to go on the offensive to wage war with military weapons. Let's be real. This is a scare tactic. Nobody's saying, at least in this argument, that civilians should own tanks or start wars. Now, ask me personally, I think we should be able to own tanks. Actually, we can own tanks, which is hilarious. But you know what? An AR-15 isn't a missile launcher. A Glock with a switch isn't a bunker buster. And as Gukin, the public defender, rightly pointed out, this is a small arm, not a tank or mounted gun. The Glock Switch is a device you can buy off the internet, made by a 3D printer. It is not a highly sophisticated piece of equipment. The very thing they're trying to ban isn't some terrifying war machine. It's a tiny piece of plastic that turns a pistol into a burst fire tool. You want to talk about danger? Let's talk about the precedent being set here, because it's not about machine guns. It's about where this logic leads. Look, I am a Xennial. You know, that weird micro generation cop between Generation X and millennials. I remember life before the internet, and I've lived most of my adult life in the middle of the digital age. That means I've seen the shift. I felt it. We used to question power by default. Now people are being taught to fear freedom and romanticize control. Schools are raising kids to believe that safety is the ultimate virtue, but real safety, the kind that lasts, is rooted in accountability, not authority. Freedom is uncomfortable, but you know what's worse? Comfortable oppression. Here's what this all comes down to. They want you to believe that if a weapon scares them, you shouldn't have it. They want to write your rights out of existence with regulations, then gaslight you by saying, well, nobody uses those anymore. They want you to accept that only the government should have certain tools and that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to the very thing it was written for. Don't fall for it. The Second Amendment isn't about deer hunting. It's about deterrence. And if we let fear, bad faith arguments, and circular logic dictate what it protects, we'll lose more than machine guns. We'll lose the very reason we had a Second Amendment in the first place. Now, if you made it this far, then I know you're not just casually watching. You actually care. You believe in responsibility, in freedom, and standing firm when everything around you says to sit down. That's why I created the Defend America collection. It's not about fashion, it's about making a quiet declaration that you still believe America is worth defending. The AR-15 design at the heart of it isn't just a symbol of a gun, it's a symbol of the right to protect what's yours. And that right does not come with an expiration date. So if that message speaks to you, click the link in the description section of this video and grab a hoodie, a hat, a mug, whatever reminds you of what we're standing for. Because Defend America isn't just a brand. It's a promise. One thing's for certain and two things are for sure. Politicians and tech giants don't want gun content to be recommended to you. And we're all fighting this culture war together. Now you can help do your part by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, but most importantly, sharing this video with at least one person. Together we can stop the suppression of our 2A rights. And don't forget to click the link in the description section of this video for the products that I mentioned in this video.